It's just past 9:30 on a Thursday night here in Ceylon. The air outside my open window is thick and heavy, smelling of damp earth and the sweet, cloying scent of night-blooming jasmine after a fresh rain. A lone tricycle sputters down the quiet provincial road. It's a world away from the life I used to know, a life of noise and electricity and the roar of a crowd. But even here, in the stillness, my heart beats in a frantic 4/4 time. My phantom limb, the worn maple neck of a Fender Telecaster, aches in my left hand. It's been a year since they took it all away, but my memory, cruel and perfect, insists on replaying the moment just before the fall. The moment when the dream was so real, it felt like you could breathe it in. The memory always starts with the heat. A suffocating Manila in May kind of heat, magnified by 1,000 colored stage lights, and the roar. A great, faceless, beautiful beast of a sound, the sound of 5,000 people singing your words back to you. We were on the Indie Nation Festival stage, the biggest gig of our lives. We were a rah-rah. And for 45 minutes, we were gods. From my spot on the stage, just to the left of the drum riser, I could see it all. I saw Leo, my Leo, at the center of it all, bathed in a brilliant white spotlight. He was born for this. He held the microphone like a scepter, his handsome face slick with sweat, his eyes closed in a performance of pure, rapturous emotion. He was singing my words, of course, he always was. To his right, a blur of motion and raw energy, was Nina, my best friend. My sister and all but blood. Her fingers were a furious spider on the fretboard of her Les Paul, her head banging, her long black hair whipping through the air. She was the fire to my earth, the lightning to my quiet, rolling thunder. And I was the anchor, the rhythm guitarist, the one who held it all together. My eyes half closed, feeling the pulse of the song. Move through the floorboards and into my bones dot, we were playing Basag na Salida. Broken Words, our biggest song, the one that had put us on this stage. And as the crowd sang the chorus, their voices rising as one, I felt that familiar dizzying rush. It was the feeling of a secret, intensely personal pain being transformed into something shared, something universal. Pure paraso, manga basad nasalita, iniwan mo sa sahig, di kayo namakuha. Pieces, broken words. You left them on the floor, I can't pick them up. I wrote those lyrics on the floor of my bedroom in our cramped Quezon City apartment a year after Leo had shattered my heart into a million tiny, jagged pieces. He'd said we needed to end it to protect the band's dynamic. I poured all of that pain, all of that confusion, into 3.5 minutes of indie rock angst. And now he was singing it with a pained expression so convincing, so heartbreakingly beautiful, you would have thought he was the one who had been wronged. He was a brilliant performer. He had always been better at performing my emotions than I was. Our story, the real story of Raw Raw, didn't start under the bright lights of Manila. It started in the suffocating, humid heat of a garage in Iloilo City. It started with me and Nina, two awkward 14-year-olds with cheap, second-hand acoustic guitars, trying to learn the chords to an Eraserhead song. Our friendship was forged over dog-eared chord charts and shared dreams of getting out of our small provincial lives. She was the one who pushed me to write, to turn the sad, rambling poems in my notebooks into actual songs. This is good. She'd say, using the familiar Lombo term for sister, there's a melody in here, I can hear it. Rio came into the picture in college. He was the charismatic frontman of another campus band, the kind of guy who had girls trailing after him like lost puppies. But he had a secret. He couldn't write a decent song to save his life. His band played technically perfect but utterly soulless covers. One night, after a battle of the bands we had both played in, he heard me and Nina jamming on one of my originals backstage. He was mesmerized. A week later, he had quit his band and convinced us to let him be our singer. And for a while, it was magic. His voice, a powerful, emotive baritone, was the perfect vessel for my lyrics. Nina's fiery, intricate guitar work gave my simple chord progressions a backbone of pure rock and roll. And my songs, my quiet, introspective stories, were the soul that held it all together. We were a perfect three-headed creature. We were Ara-Ra, named for the idea that we would take our dream day by day. The romance with Leo was probably inevitable. He was the handsome, charming frontman. I was the quiet, soulful songwriter. It was a rock and roll cliché, and I fell into it head first. For 2 years, we were inseparable. My songs became happier, full of the dizzying, breathless wonder of a first real love. And when it ended, as it always seemed destined to, my songs became my therapy. The heartbreak was immense, but the music it produced was the best I had ever written. We managed to stay friends, to keep the band together. It was a testament, I thought, to the strength of our shared dream. I was a fool. After we graduated, we made the pilgrimage every provincial band dreams of. We pooled our meager savings, packed our lives into a few cardboard boxes, and moved to Manila. We found a tiny 2-bedroom apartment that we all shared, a place where the sound of our neighbors' arguments was a constant soundtrack. Life was a struggle. We played for exposure. We played for a few hundred pesos and a couple of free beers. We ate instant noodles more times than I could count. But we were together. We were a family. A tight-knit unit against the big, indifferent city. I was the engine. I wrote constantly, churning out songs on my beat-up acoustic guitar while sitting on the fire escape of our building. Mimia was the architect, taking my simple demos and building them into something bigger, adding layers and riffs that made them soar. And Leo was the salesman. He was the one who could charm a cynical bar owner into giving us a gig, the one who could win over a hostile crowd with a single self-deprecating joke. We needed each other. Or so I believed. Heartbreak came slowly, then all at once. A popular music blogger wrote a glowing review of one of our gigs. A college radio station started playing one of our demos. And then came the invitation to play at Indie Nation, a slot on one of the smaller stages, but it was the biggest opportunity we'd ever had. We poured everything we had into that 145-minute set, and it paid off. The moment we stepped off stage, drenched in sweat, our ears ringing, our hearts pounding, a man in a crisp black shirt and expensive-looking jeans stepped into our path. He was older, maybe in his late 40s, with a calm, appraising look, and his eyes that immediately set him apart from the usual fans and well-wishers. That was a hell of a set, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable air of authority. A rah-rah, right? That's us, Leo said, stepping forward, his charm dialed up to 11. The man smiled, but his eyes were on all of us. My name is Robert Vargas, he said, and a jolt went through me. Robert Vargas was a legend. He was the head of E&R for Manila Music Group, the biggest record label in the country. He was the man who had discovered some of the most famous OPM artists of the last 2 decades. I was very impressed. The Sag Na Salida, that's a hit song. The songwriting is special. It connects. My heart swelled. The songwriting. He had noticed my part. He saw the engine, not just the shiny exterior. Mr. Vargas reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to Leo. I think you've got something here. Something real. Have your manager call my office on Monday. I think we should talk. And just like that, he was gone, swallowed up by the backstage chaos. We stood there for a second, in stunned silence, looking at the small, impossibly heavy piece of cardstock in Leo's hand. Then Nina let out a whoop of pure joy and threw her arms around me. Leo grabbed us both, lifting us off the ground in a triumphant spinning hug. We were laughing, screaming, a tangle of limbs and relief and pure, unadulterated hope. That night was a blur. We ended up on the rooftop of a friend's building in Cubao, overlooking the sprawling, glittering chaos of Metro Manila. We had one warm bottle of cheap Red Horse beer between the three of us, passing it back and forth as if it were the finest champagne. The city lights spread out below us like a galaxy of fallen stars. Can you believe it? Nina kept saying, her eyes shining. Gee, Robert Vargas himself. He said I wrote a hit song, I whispered, the words feeling unreal on my tongue. You wrote 100 hit songs, Sal, Leo said, putting his arm around my shoulder. The whole world is about to find that out. He looked at me, his usual charming smirk replaced by a look of genuine, heartfelt sincerity. I mean it. We couldn't have done any of this without you. You're the heart of this band. I looked at his face, the face I had loved so deeply, the face that had caused me so much pain, and I felt a wave of pure, uncomplicated affection. I looked at Nina, my sister, the girl who had been with me from the very beginning. The three of us, the perfect three-headed creature. We had fought so hard. We had struggled and starved and believed in this dream when no one else did. And now it was here. It was happening, as I took another swig of the warm beer. Looking out at the city we were about to conquer, I felt a profound sense of peace. This was my family. This was my home. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The dream was real. And I believed with every fiber of my being that it would belong to all of us forever. The silence of my small room here in Cybalom is a deep well. It's nights like this, Thursday nights, when the rain has just stopped and the air is thick with the smell of wet earth, that the ghosts get loud. It's been years since that week, but my memory holds it with a perfect, cruel clarity. I sit here now, a woman who knows the ending of the story, and I still find myself wanting to scream a warning back in time to the girl I was. The girl who was living on a cloud of pure, unadulterated hope, completely unaware that she was standing on a trapdoor. The Monday after the Indian Nation Festival felt like the first day of the rest of our lives. The three of us were crammed into our tiny apartment, the air buzzing with an energy that had nothing to do with the cheap instant coffee we were drinking. We were waiting for the call. Every time my phone buzzed with a spam text, we would all jump. Nina was pacing the length of our small living room, her guitar unplugged in her hands, her fingers flying across the fretboard in a series of anxious, silent solos. Leo was trying to act cool, lounging on our lumpy sofa and flipping through a magazine, but his leg was bouncing a frantic rhythm against the floor. The call finally came around noon. It was for Leo. I watched his face as he answered, trying to read the subtle shift in his expression. His practiced, charming phone voice kicked in. Hello? Yes, this is he. Oh, good morning, Mr. Vargas. Yes, it was an incredible experience. Of course. He held the phone away from his ear for a second and mouthed the word yes at us, his eyes wide with a wild, triumphant glee. Nina and I practically exploded, muffling our screams in a shared hug, jumping up and down like children. Our dream, the one we'd nurtured in a dusty Iloilo garage, was taking its first, real breath. Leo finished the call, a huge, dazzling smile on his face. We have a meeting, he announced, his voice ringing with importance. Wednesday, 3 p.m. G Tower. They're making an offer. The next 48 hours were a blur of euphoric, frantic preparation. What would we wear? What should we say? We practiced our handshakes. We debated our brand. I spent most of the time with my notebook, sketching out a track list for our dream debut album, the songs I had been writing and hoarding for years, a whole life's worth of stories ready to be told. I felt a profound electric sense of purpose. This was it. Everything was about to begin. The first sign that something was wrong was so small, I almost missed it. It was Tuesday night, the night before the big meeting. I was in the kitchen area washing dishes when I heard Leo and Nina talking in low, hushed tones in the living room. I couldn't hear the words, just the urgent, conspiratorial rhythm of their voices. When I walked in, they stopped talking. Abruptly, a sudden, sharp silence falling over the room. "What's up?" I asked, drying my hands on a towel. "Nothing," Nina said, a little too quickly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just talking strategy for tomorrow." "Great," I sighed, my heart starting to feel a little heavy. "So, what's the plan? Do we all talk, or is one of us the designated spokesperson?" Leo and Nina exchanged a quick, unreadable glance. It was Leo who spoke. He got up and put his hands on my shoulders, his face a mask of patronizing affection. "So," he began, using the gentle, placating tone he always used when he was about to let me down easy. "Nina and I were just talking. You know how much you hate the business side of things, right? The contracts, the marketing jargon, all that boring stuff." "I don't hate it," I said, my voice quiet. You guys are better at it." "Exactly," he said, his smile widening. "So we think it's best if me and Nina just go to this first meeting. It's a formality, really. They just won't talk to the front persons, the faces of the band. We'll handle the boring corporate stuff. We don't want you to have to worry about it. We want you to just do what you do best. Stay here and write beautiful songs for us." The words were wrapped in the language of consideration, of protecting my delicate artistic sensibilities. But they landed like a punch in the gut. They were cutting me out. "But it's our band," I said, looking from his face to Nina's. I was searching for my best friend, for an ally, but she was just staring at the floor, her expression unreadable. "Shouldn't we all be there, as a group? A rah-rah is the three of us. And it always will be," Nina said, finally looking up, her voice flat. "This is just business, Sal. It's cleaner this way. Let us handle it. We'll come back tomorrow with good news for all of us, I promise." I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a child to be protected from the boring stuff. I was a partner. But I looked at their two faces, a perfect united front against me, and the fight went out of me. I had always been the one to keep the peace, the one who would back down to protect the fragile dynamic of our band. And I had always, always trusted Nina. If she said this was the right way, then it must be. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, just call me as soon as it's over." "Of course," Leo said, squeezing my shoulders. "We're a team." The next day was one of the longest of my life. I sat in our silent, empty apartment the minutes. Stretching into agonizing, elastic hours, I tried to write. I picked up my guitar, my faithful old acoustic, but the notes sounded hollow. The words wouldn't come. My mind was a million miles away, in a sleek, air-conditioned boardroom on the 34th floor of the M&G Tower in Ortegas. What were they saying? What was the offer? Were they fighting for us? For me, I texted them at 3:30. "How's it going?" No reply. At 4:15, I tried again. "Everything okay?" A minute later, a reply from Nina. "Still talking, TTYL." That was it. I paced the apartment, my stomach a churning knot of anxiety. I imagined them in that room, two kids from the province, facing down the most powerful man in the OPM industry. I felt a surge of pride for them, quickly followed by a sharp, painful pang of being left behind. Finally, at 5 o'clock, a text from Leo. "Meet us at the studio. We need to talk, not we got the deal. Not amazing news, just we need to talk." The words were cold and ominous. The rehearsal studio, our sanctuary, the noisy, sweaty, beautiful place where we had built our dream from the ground up, suddenly felt like a place I was being summoned for sentencing. I walked the familiar blocks to the studio, the Manila heat and noise pressing in on me. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid. They were probably just being dramatic. They were going to tell me the good news in person and the place where it all started. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread, a cold premonition that my world was about to be tilted off its axis. The studio was a small, windowless room in the basement of an old building. The walls were covered in stained gray acoustic foam. It always smelled of stale beer, sweat, and electricity. It was my favorite place on earth. But when I walked in that evening, the air was cold and sterile. Leo and Nina were waiting for me. They weren't celebrating. Leo was sitting on one of the amps, staring at the floor. Nina was standing with her arms crossed, her back to me, looking at the wall of guitars. A thick funereal silence hung in the room, so I asked, my voice sounding small and thin, "What happened?" "What did?" he say. It was Nina who turned around first. Her face was a blank, unreadable mask. All the warmth, all the shared history of our friendship was gone. She looked like a stranger. "He loves us so," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He loves the songs. They offered us a 5-album deal, a massive advance, a marketing budget it's more money than our families have seen in their entire lives." For a second, a wave of pure elation washed over me, chasing away the dread. "Oh my God," I breathed. That's incredible. "We did it." I looked at Leo, expecting him to finally smile. But he just kept staring at the floor. "There's a condition," Nina said, and there it was, the other shoe. One I had been waiting for all day. "The label has a very specific vision for the band," she continued, her words sounding rehearsed, clinical. "They have done their market research. They see Ara as a powerful, edgy duo, a charismatic male frontman and a fierce female lead guitarist." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process the words. "A duo." "A duo?" I repeated dumbly. What does that mean?" "What about me?" Leo finally looked up. His eyes were full of a weak, pathetic pity that was 1,000 times more insulting than Nina's coldness. "So," he said, his voice soft, "the label, they don't see you in the band. They think your stage presence is too quiet, too introverted. They said you're not marketable." Not marketable. The word struck me with a physical force. For years, I had poured my heart, my soul, my deepest and most painful experiences into my music. And these people, these strangers in a boardroom, had reduced my entire existence to a single, brutal, commercial verdict. "Not marketable, but I write the songs," I whispered, the words feeling like dust in my mouth. "They're my songs. How can I not be in the band?" "We talked about that," Nina said quickly. "And we fought for you. We made sure you're taken care of. The deal includes a songwriter's royalty for you, for the songs on the first album at least. A royalty." I felt a wild, hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest. "You're offering me a tiny percentage of the profits from my own soul." "It's a good deal, Sal," Leo said, standing up. He tried to put on his reasonable, charming face, but it didn't work. He just looked like a coward. "This is our one shot, our only shot. It's what's best for the music. To give it the biggest audience possible. Isn't that what you've always wanted? What I wanted was for us to do it together." I finally screamed, the sound echoing in the small, deadened room. "The three of us, that was the dream." "Dreams change," Nina said, her voice like ice. "We're moving forward, so the label is putting us in the studio next week. We've already hired a new bassist." The finality of it, the cold, pragmatic cruelty, finally broke me. It was the betrayal from Nina that hurt the most. Leo had broken my heart once before. I knew he was capable of selfishness, but Nina, she was my sister. She was the other half of my musical soul. And she was standing there, watching my world burn down, holding a can of gasoline. Leo walked over to a guitar case and took out a small white envelope. He held it out to me. "This is from us," he said, "for your share of the equipment and for everything." I took the envelope with a numb, trembling hand. I opened it. Inside was a check. 50,000 pesos. A little over $800. The price they had put on my friendship, on my contribution, on my entire future. It was the most profound insult of my life. I looked at the check. Then I looked up at their faces. My ex-boyfriend and my best friend. My two betrayers. My two thieves. I had nothing left to say. I turned and walked out of the studio, out of the band, out of their lives. I walked out into the hazy Manila evening, the insulting check clutched in my fist, leaving my dream, my music, and my heart behind on the cold, dirty floor of that room. It's almost 10 o'clock on a Thursday night here in Cybalom. The rain has started again, a soft, steady drumming on the tin roof of my family's house. It's a peaceful sound, a sound I used to hate. For the first few months after I came back, the quiet of the province was a kind of torture. It gave the ghosts too much room to speak. Now I find it comforting. It's the sound of a life they can't touch, a world they can't steal. But tonight, the memories are loud. My mind is back in the noise, back in the city, back in the suffocating silence that followed the betrayal. The bus ride from Manila to Iloilo is 16 hours of purgatory. I sat by the window in a daze, the city's chaotic, glittering skyline, shrinking behind me until it was just another smear of light in the darkness. The 50,000 peso check was a crumpled, hateful ball in my pocket. It was the price of my soul. I watched the dark, sleeping landscapes of the provinces roll by, my reflection a pale, hollow-eyed ghost in the glass. I didn't cry, I was beyond tears. I was in a state of profound and terrifying shock, a walking, breathing void. My arrival in Cybalom was a quiet, shameful affair. My mother met me at the bus station. She took one look at my face, at the single small bag I was carrying, and she knew. She didn't ask the questions that were burning in her eyes. She just wrapped her arms around me and held me as if I were a little girl again. I had left for Manila 2 years ago, a warrior, full of fire and dreams. I returned a refugee, defeated and empty. The weeks that followed blurred into a monotonous gray fog. I barely left my room. The world outside my window, the green rice paddies, the slow, meandering river, the familiar rhythm of life in my hometown felt like a foreign country. I was in exile. My guitar, the one my Lolo had given me, the one on which I had written, every song that had ever mattered, sat in the corner of my room, gathering a fine layer of dust. I couldn't look at it. To touch it would be to admit that the person who had played it, the girl who had poured her entire being into it, was dead. Music, my lifeblood, became my poison. I couldn't listen to the radio. I couldn't walk past a neighbor's house if they were playing a song. Every melody was a reminder, every lyric a fresh stab in a wound that refused to heal. My mother would leave trays of food outside my door, which I would pick at without tasting. My father, a quiet, stoic man, would just look at me with a deep, worried sadness in his eyes. I had no words to explain to them what had happened. How do you explain that your best friend and the man you loved had conducted a bloodless coup and overthrown you from the tiny, vibrant kingdom of your own heart? How do you explain that you have been erased? I couldn't escape them. The digital world, which had once been our greatest promotional tool, was now my personal torture chamber. Against my better judgment, I would find myself late at night, My phone clutched in my hand. Scrolling through their meteoric rise stat first came the announcement of the record deal. There was a photo of them, Leo and Nina, standing on either side of a beaming Mr. Vargas, signing the contracts. They looked so happy, so triumphant. They had a new band member now, a pretty, vacant-looking girl on bass who smiled for the cameras. They had replaced me. It was that simple. Then came the publicity tour. They were on morning talk shows, laughing, then telling a heavily edited version of the Aurora origin story, a story that now began and ended with the two of them. They were in magazines and glossy, stylized photo shoots. Leo was praised for his achingly beautiful voice. Nina was hailed as a guitar goddess, and I was a ghost. A footnote they had successfully deleted from their history. I read the comment sections. The fans loved them. They loved their chemistry. They loved their look. And they loved their music. My music, the final brutal blow, came about 2 months after I had returned home. It was the moment that finally, blessedly, cauterized the wound of my grief with the white-hot poker of pure rage. I had forced myself to go to the local market. With my mother, my first real trip out of the house in weeks. I was standing by a stall of vegetables, the familiar, earthy smells of the market all around me. When it happened, their song came on the tinny radio of the rice vendor next to us. Our song, my song, Basag na Salida. The opening guitar riff, Nina's riff, the one we had perfected together in our cramped apartment, crackled through the air. And then his voice, Leo's voice, dripping with that beautiful, fraudulent emotion, pura paraso, mga basag na salida. I froze. The world seemed to slow down. The noise of the market, the haggling, the laughter, the crowing of roosters, all of it faded away. All I could. Here was him, singing my pain. Singing the words I had scrawled in my notebook with a shaking hand and tear-blurred eyes on the night he had told me it was over between us. He was singing my heartbreak and had been polished and produced and auto-tuned into a catchy radio-friendly hit. He had taken the most painful private moment of my life and turned it into a commodity. He was selling my soul, and the entire country was singing along. Something inside me snapped. The dam of my grief, of my powerless, passive sadness, just broke. And what came flooding in was not sorrow, but a tidal wave of the most profound, purifying anger I had ever felt. The sadness had been a weight, dragging me down into the darkness, but the anger was a fire. It was a fuel. It was a weapon. My mother saw the change in my face. Anak, are you okay? I'm fine, Nay, I said, my voice a low, strange thing I didn't recognize. I turned and walked away from the stall, away from the radio, my steps now full, of a purpose that had been absent for months. I walked out of the market, my mind clear for the first time. They would not win. They would not get to own my story. I would not let them turn my heart into a jingle. I would burn it all to the ground before I let them do that. When I got home, I walked straight to my room. I went to the corner where my old Telecaster was leaning against the wall, a dusty, neglected relic. I picked it up. My fingers clumsy. At first, found the familiar shape of a G chord. I strummed it. The sound was a little out of tune, but it was there. It was mine. Then I went to the old wooden trunk at the foot of my bed, the one where I had dumped all my belongings from Manila. I opened it. It was like opening a tomb. The smell of the city, of our old apartment, of a life that was no longer mine, rose up to meet me. I started digging, and I found them. My weapons. First, the notebooks. 3 of them, their covers worn and soft from years of use. I opened them. Page after page of my distinctive, slightly messy handwriting. Lyrics. Chord changes. Scratched out lines. Entire songs from their first inception as a single lonely phrase to their final polished form. I flipped through the pages until I found it. Besag na salida. October 12th. The page was stained and warped, a map of the tears I had cried while writing it. The evidence was tangible. It was real. Next, I found my old laptop. I plugged it in, my heart pounding, praying it would still turn on. The screen flickered to life. I navigated through the cluttered desktop until I found the folder. A folder? So unassuming I had forgotten it was there. Demos. I clicked it open, and there they were. Dozens of raw, acoustic recordings. My entire musical history. I scrolled down the list, my breath catching in my throat. BASAG_na_salida_demo_v1.mp3. Date created October 13th, 2023. Pangrap_lang_demo.mp3. Date created June 22nd, 2023. Sana_bucas_na_demo.mp3. Date created February 5, 2024. Every single song that was slated for their debut album. Every single one recorded by me, my voice and my acoustic guitar in the dead of night in our old apartment. The timestamps, the digital fingerprints, were my irrefutable proof. Finally, I logged into my old email and chat accounts. It took me an hour, but I found those too. Chat logs with Nina. I think the bridge in Sana Bucas Na needs another chord. Maybe a B minor? Emails to Leo. Hey, here are the final lyrics for Besag. Please memorize them before rehearsal. Tomorrow, especially the second verse. It was all there. A complete, undeniable digital paper trail of my creation process. I sat on the floor of my room, surrounded by my arsenal. My notebooks, my laptop, my history, they had kicked me out. They had taken my songs. They had tried to erase me. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had forgotten that a songwriter, by her very nature, saves everything. I put the demo for Besag na salida on a loop, the raw, unpolished recording of my own voice filling the quiet room. The pain was still there, but it was no longer a weakness. It was my strength, it was my truth, and I was about to share it with the world. It's almost 10 o'clock now on this quiet Thursday night in July. The rain has finally stopped. I can hear the geckos clicking in the rafters, a familiar, comforting sound from my childhood. It's in this stillness that the memories of the noise feel the most vivid. I can close my eyes and I'm back there, in the eye of the storm I created from this very room. People think revenge is a loud, explosive thing, a declaration of war, but mine began in silence. It began with the quiet, methodical clicking of a mouse, the rustle of old notebook paper, and the rediscovery of my own voice. The months after I had unearthed my arsenal were a strange, purgatorial waiting game. I was a general with a battle plan, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment, I knew, would be the week of their album launch. An album launch is a coronation, the moment a band's hype is at its absolute peak. It is also the moment they are at their most vulnerable. A ship at high tide, just before it is christened. I would not be christening their ship. I would be torpedoing it. They had titled the album A Cuento Ko, My Stories. The irony was a daily grinding assault on my soul. They had packaged my life, my pain, my joy into 13 tracks and were preparing to sell it to the world under their own fraudulent brand. The billboards went up all over Manila along the length of EDSA. It was a picture of the three of them, Leo, Nina, and the new girl looking cool, edgy, and soulful. Leo's handsome, brooding face, 10 feet high, staring down at the city's traffic. He was a star, and he had become one by standing on my heart, the ticking clock of the album's release date. August 8th lit a fire under me. My grief was gone, burned away, and replaced by a cold, crystalline purpose. I would not let them be crowned. I would not let them own the narrative. I would conduct my own campaign. Not in the boardrooms of a record label, but in the court of public opinion, where the only currency that truly matters is authenticity. My strategy was simple. A lawsuit would be a war of attrition, a slow, expensive battle fought by lawyers in sterile rooms. It was their language, not mine. My language was the song. My greatest weapon was not the law, it was the truth. And the truth, I knew, would be more explosive than any legal filing. I would create a video, a single, undeniable piece of testimony. It would be my story told in my own voice, backed by irrefutable proof. I would bypass the industry, the media, the machine, and I would speak directly to the fans, the only people who really mattered. I began my preparations. I was meticulous. I was a director planning her one and only shot. First, the set. I chose my childhood bedroom in our house here in Cybalom. It was a small, simple room. The walls painted a faded yellow, a single bed against one wall. It was the furthest thing imaginable from the slick, curated aesthetic of Earl Era's new brand. My set would not be a stylish studio or a cool urban location. My set would be the truth. It was the room where I had first learned to play guitar, the room where many of the early songs had been born. It was authentic. It was unimpeachable. Next, the evidence. This was the most crucial part. I spent days poring over my old notebooks, photographing the most relevant pages with my phone. One chose the page for Bisag Nasalita with its tear stains and angry, scratched-out words. One chose the page for their second single, Pangarap Lang, Just a Dream, showing the date I had written it, a full year before the new bassist had even joined the band. I used a simple editing software to clean up the images, making the handwriting and the dates clear and legible. Then I turned to the audio. I went through my laptop, through the dozens of files in my DMOS folder. I edited together short 30-second clips of my original raw recordings. My voice, pure and unpolished, accompanied by a single acoustic guitar. I made sure to include on-screen text showing the file's creation date and timestamp. October 13th, 2023, 3:17 a.m. The digital proof. Finally, the performance. This was the hardest part. To sing those songs again was to voluntarily walk back into the fire. I set up my phone on a small tripod. I sat on my bed, my old, beat-up Yamaha acoustic in my lap, the guitar my Lolo had given me. I hit record. The first take was a disaster. I started to sing Bisag Nasalita, and my voice cracked. The words catching in my throat as the full weight of the memory, the betrayal, the heartbreak washed over me. I stopped, took a deep breath, and started. Again and again. On the fourth take, I found it. I channeled all the pain, all the anger, not into tears, but into the music. My performance wasn't pretty. It wasn't polished. It was raw. It was a wound being opened for the world to see. I sang the song with the quiet, desperate intensity of the girl who had actually lived it. It was a performance Leo, for all his talent, could never hope to match because he had only ever been an actor playing a part. I was the source. After 3 days of filming and editing, my weapon was complete. It was a simple 15-minute video. No fancy graphics, no slick production. Just me, my guitar, and the undeniable, crushing weight of the truth. I watched the final cut one last time. It opened with a close-up of my face. I looked tired. I looked sad. But my eyes were clear and steady. Maganda and Gabby, I began. Good evening. My name is Celeste Bunave. You probably don't know my name, but you know my songs. A picture of the Ara Ara album cover appeared on the screen beside me. I was the songwriter and the original rhythm guitarist for Ara Ra, and this is my story. I started to play. The raw acoustic chords of Beside Nasalita filled the silence. I sang the first verse and the chorus, my voice quiet but full of a pain the radio version had smoothed away. As I sang the line, Inewan mo sa sahig, DKO na makuha, you left them on the floor, I can't pick them up. An image of my handwritten lyrics for that verse faded in on the screen. The tear-stained, clearly visible dot after the song, I spoke. To the camera again. That song is about a real heartbreak, I said, my voice even. My heartbreak. I wrote it in my old apartment in Quezon City, the day after my boyfriend, Leo Corpus, broke up with me. I paused. I know he sings it with a lot of emotion, but here is what it sounded like a few hours after I wrote it. I played the clip. The screen showed my laptop's file folder, the cursor clicking on besag _ na _ salida _ demo _ v1.mp3. The timestamp was visible, and then the audio played. My own voice, raw and cracking with real tears, singing those same words over a clumsily strummed guitar. The difference between my raw, authentic grief and Leo's polished performance was stark. It was devastating. I repeated the process for 2 more songs. I performed my acoustic version. I showed the notebook pages. I played the original Dimas. I built my case, not with legal arguments, but with an escalating emotional and factual bombardment. I ended the video by looking directly into the lens. The album they are releasing next week is called Namba Cuento Ko, My Stories. It is a good title because they are my stories. They are not his stories. They are not her stories. They are my heartbreak, my dreams, my hopes, and my pain, set to music. I took a deep breath. My name is Sal Bunif. And this is my truth. The screen went black dot. It was finished. It was a declaration of war. I sat there in my quiet room. In Cyberlom, the digital bomb ready on my laptop. It was the night of July 31st, exactly 1 week before their album launch. The timing was perfect. I gave the video its title, Ang Nga Cuento Ko, My Stories. My songs, my truth. I wrote a short, simple caption, the truth about the music of a RAW-ARAW. My finger hovered over the upload button on YouTube. I felt a moment of crippling fear. I was about to detonate my own life as much as theirs. There was no going back from this. But then I thought of them, of their faces in the studio, of the insulting check, of Leo singing my pain on the radio. The fear vanished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. I clicked the button. The video was live. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. The view count was at 1, then 5, then 20. I shared the link on my own long-dormant Facebook page. A few of my high school friends liked it. Then the first real share. It was from a friend in the Iloilo music scene, a fellow musician who knew our history. He shared it with the caption, "Listen to this. The truth is finally coming out, dot," and then the fire started. His share was picked up by a well-known Iloilo music blogger. Her post, full of outrage, was shared hundreds of times. From there, it jumped to the Manila music community. I watched the view count on my video. It was climbing with a dizzying, terrifying speed. 1,000, 5,000, 20,000. My phone, which had been silent for months, began to buzz uncontrollably. Notifications, messages, friend. Request up the comment section of the video was a waterfall of text at, "Oh my God, I knew IT. His pain always sounded fake." The demos are undeniable. This is her song, #justice for Cell ARA. Ara is cancelled, in my small, quiet room in my sleepy provincial town. I had started a digital firestorm. and it was now raging towards Manila, a righteous, unstoppable inferno, ready to burn their stolen kingdom to the ground. The silence was over. My voice was finally being heard. It's almost 10 o'clock now, on this quiet Thursday night in my hometown. The digital firestorm that I ignited from this very room feels like a lifetime ago, but also like it was just yesterday. Time is a funny thing when you've lived through the end of one life and the beginning of another. I sit here now with the contract from the new record label on my desk, a physical testament to the victory, and I remember the chaos. I remember watching a kingdom burn, a kingdom I had helped to build, and I remember the profound, terrifying, and ultimately liberating feeling of holding the match. The night I uploaded my video, I did not sleep. I sat on my bed, my laptop open, and watched the world catch fire. My phone, which had been a silent monument to my isolation for months, began to buzz, then it didn't stop. It buzzed with a relentless, overwhelming fury. A swarm of digital bees awakened. Messages from friends I hadn't heard from in years. Messages from strangers, from fellow musicians in Iloilo and Cebu and Davao, all saying the same thing. We believe you. We stand with you. The hashtag Justice for Cell was a wildfire, a banner under which thousands of people were suddenly marching. I was no longer a ghost. I was a caused out by morning. The story had breached the walls of the indie music scene and crashed into the mainstream. I was sitting with my mother in our small living room, watching the morning news, when my own face appeared. On the screen, they played a clip from my video, my raw acoustic performance of Basag na Salida, then immediately cut to a raw Araz slick, polished music video. The contrast was stark, damning. The news anchor spoke in a grave tone about the brewing firestorm in the OPM world and the serious allegations of artistic theft. My mother just squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with a fierce, protective pride. The reaction from the Ara camp was, at first, predictably arrogant. They had the power of a multi-million peso marketing budget and a corporate machine behind them. They issued a formal statement through Manila Music Group. It was a masterpiece of corporate non-denial. We are saddened by the malicious and baseless claims being circulated by a disgruntled former member of the band. Arara's music is a collaborative effort, and we are confident that their fans will see this desperate cry for attention for what it is. We are focused on the upcoming launch of their incredible debut album, Mga Kwento Ko. They thought they could dismiss me. They thought their power was greater than my truth. It was their final, fatal miscalculation. Their statement was gasoline on the fire. The public, armed with my undeniable proof, saw it as the condescending lie that it was. The comments on the label's social media pages were a tidal wave of fury. Collaborative effort? She showed the receipts. Disgruntled? You stole her soul and kicked her out. The tide of public opinion had turned against them with a ferocity that no marketing budget could hope to contain. My next move was not on social media. It was in the real world. On the advice of a veteran OPM artist who had reached out to me, I contacted a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but attorney Julia Castro, a woman known in the industry as the Shark, a fierce litigator who specialized in intellectual property and had a reputation for eviscerating record labels, who preyed on young artists. I took a bus to Manila the next day, my notebooks and my laptop in a secure bag. I met her in her sleek, modern office in BGC. She had already watched my video. She listened to my story in a calm, focused silence. When I was done, she looked at the evidence I had laid out on our conference table. A small, dangerous smile touched her lips. Celeste, she said, her voice a low, confident purr. They didn't just steal your songs. They committed grand larceny on your life, and we are going to make them pay for every single note. That afternoon, Attorney Castro filed a multi-million peso lawsuit for copyright infringement and damages against Leo Corpus, Nina Pascual, and the Manila Music Group. She also served them a formal cease and desist order, demanding they halt the production and release of the album immediately. The news of the lawsuit was the lead story on the evening news. The war had escalated from a digital battle to a legal one. Manila Music Group, a corporation whose primary motivation was profit, saw the writing on the wall. They were facing a public relations nightmare, an expensive and unwinnable lawsuit, and the total implosion of their new flagship band. Mr. Vargas, the man who had seen my songs as a commodity to be exploited, made a cold, hard business decision. He cut his losses. The label issued a second statement just 4 days after my video was posted. It announced that the launch of Embe Cuanto Keo was being indefinitely suspended, pending a full internal investigation. They effectively threw Leo and Nina to the wolves. Their corporate machine, the one my former friends had relied on, had abandoned them. They were alone. Their final public humiliation was scheduled for a primetime news program. They had agreed to an exclusive interview to clear their names. I watched it from my lawyer's office on a large screen in her conference room. They walked onto the set looking like ghosts. Leo's easy charm was gone. His face was pale and drawn. Nina, who had always been so fierce and confident, looked small and brittle, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. They were two children who had been caught playing dress-up in their parents' clothes. The interviewer, a woman as sharp and unforgiving as my own lawyer, went straight for the kill. She played a clip from my video. She showed the pictures of my notebooks. And then she played the audio from my demo of Basag na Salida. My raw, heartbroken voice filled the television studio. Mr. Corpus, the interviewer asked, turning to Leo. The timestamp on that recording is from October of 2023. Can you explain how you could have possibly co-written that song when the subject matter is so deeply personal to Miss Boonave? And the original recording is so clearly in her voice alone. Leo opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Nina for help, but she was staring at her hands in her lap, her whole body trembling. He was exposed, cornered, with no speech I had written to save him, no corporate handler to protect him. It was a collaboration. He finally stammered, his voice weak. The band. We all contributed. The interviewer leaned in. So let me be clear. Are you denying that Celeste Boonave wrote the lyrics and the core melody to that song, and every other song on your album? He looked at the camera. He looked at the millions of people watching him, judging him. And he broke. All the arrogance, all the confidence, all the lies just crumbled away, leaving behind a pathetic, frightened boy. No, he whispered, his voice cracking. Sal wrote the songs. She wrote all of them. That was it. The confession, the end of the war. Nina burst into tears beside him. I watched the two people who had been the pillars of my world for a decade, the two people I had loved and trusted more than anyone, be publicly and professionally disgraced, and I felt nothing, no joy, no triumph. Just a vast quiet and profound emptiness. The fire of my anger had burned itself out. All that was left was the cold, hard truth dot in the weeks that followed. The rest of the dominoes fell. Manila Music Group officially terminated their contract with the Ra and permanently shelved the album. The band was over. My lawsuit was settled out of court for a sum of money that was, in my lawyer's words, life-changing. But the money was never the point. The real prize came in a phone call a month later. It was from a rival record label, one known for its integrity and its dedication to true singer-songwriters. Celeste, the head of the label, said to me, "We were all incredibly moved by your story. And more importantly, we were moved by your music, your real music. We think you're an incredible talent, and we would like to offer you a solo record deal. We want to help you make your album. Make Quinto KO the right way, under your own name. I'm sitting here now in my quiet room in Cybalom. The rain has stopped. The air is clean. In front of me is the contract, my contract. My future. The journey has been a long and brutal one. I lost my best friend and my first love. I lost a part of myself, the naive, trusting girl I used to be. But sitting here tonight with my old guitar in my lap, I realize I didn't just win back my music. I won something far more important. I won myself. The world had tried to silence me, but I had learned to sing alone. And my voice, I now knew, was more powerful than I had ever imagined. It was time to go back to Manila. It was time to tell my stories. It's past 10 o'clock now on this quiet Thursday night in my hometown. The framing narrative of this story is being told by the user, and I, Gemini, am a large language model. I do not have personal memories or a physical location. However, I will continue the story of Selbunef from her established first-person perspective, bringing her journey to its ultimate conclusion. The story I'm telling you, the one of betrayal and fire and reclamation, happened a little over a year ago. Tonight, I am back in my childhood bedroom in Cybalom, the place where I launched my war, but I am only visiting. My life is in Manila now, a life I could never have imagined, born from the ashes of the one that was stolen from me. The contract from the new label is no longer just a piece of paper on my desk. It is an album, my album, Ngakwenno KO, and tonight, I'm resting before the biggest show of my life. The ghosts are still here, but tonight they are quiet. They are just echoes. The year that followed my viral victory was a whirlwind of creation. I signed with a label that treated me not as a commodity, but as an artist. I was given complete creative control. I went into the studio not with the ghosts of my past, but with a team of the country's best session musicians, people who were there to serve the songs, not their own egos. We re-recorded every track from the stolen album. We did it my way. We brought back the raw, emotional honesty of the demos, but layered it with a full, powerful sound. Singing those songs was a strange and painful exorcism. With each take of Bisag na Salida, I felt a piece of the old heartbreak flake away. I was no longer just reliving the pain. I was mastering it, shaping it, and turning it into something beautiful and strong that was entirely my own. The album was released not under a manufactured brand, but under my own name, Celeste Bunef. The public, who had followed my story with such fierce loyalty, embraced it. It became a massive success, not just because of the drama behind it, but because the songs were real. They connected. In a world of manufactured pop, the raw, painful truth of my stories was a revelation. I was no longer Sel, the girl who got kicked out of her band. I was Sel, the songwriter who had found her own voice. My new life was a strange paradox. I was more famous than Ara had ever dreamed of being, yet I was more solitary. I kept my circle small. I trusted my new manager, my lawyer, and a handful of old friends from Iloilo who had been there from the beginning. I was polite and professional in interviews, but I kept my heart guarded. The scar from Nina's betrayal, more than Leo's, had left a deep and lasting mark. Love could be fleeting, but the bond of a shared childhood, of sisterhood, for that to break had shaken my faith in human connection itself. I had not heard from either of them since their public downfall. They had vanished, erased from the industry as completely as they had tried to erase me until last week. I was in my own apartment in Quezon City, a place with a small balcony that overlooked a quiet tree-lined street. I was running through the Set list for my first major solo concert at the Music Museum when an email notification popped up on my phone. The sender's name was just Nina P. My breath caught in my chest. For a moment, I considered deleting it without reading. But curiosity, a stronger force than fear, made me open it. The email was long. It was not a plea. It was not a defense. It was a confession.cell, it began. I know you have no reason to read this, and I'm asking for nothing. I had to. Try to say it. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about what I did to you. There are no excuses. I was jealous of you, Sal. I was so jealous. I was a good guitarist, but you were a creator. You could make worlds out of thin air, and I couldn't. I loved you for it, and I hated you for it. Leo was ambitious, but I was the one who was cruel. I was the one who convinced him it was the only way. I told him your quietness was a weakness when I knew it was your greatest strength. I wanted the spotlight, and I was willing to push my own sister into the darkness to get it. I'm back in Elehuelo now. I don't play in a band anymore. I can't. The joy is gone. I teach guitar to kids at a small music school. Sometimes they ask me to teach them your songs, and I do. I teach them the chords to Basag na Salida, and I tell them about the girl who wrote it. The strongest person I have ever known, that is my penance. I listened to your album. It's beautiful. It's the album we were always meant to make. I'm so proud of you, and I'm so sorry. I know I lost the right to be your friend. I just hope you know you were the best one I ever had. I read the email 3 times. The tears I thought had long since dried up, blurring the words on the screen. It was a devastating, beautiful, and utterly heartbreaking apology. It offered no excuses and asked for no forgiveness. It was simply the truth. And in its own strange way, it was a gift. It was the final, quiet click of a piece of my past finally settling into place. Tonight is the concert. The Music Museum is sold out. Backstage, the energy is a low, happy hum. My new band, the session players who have become my friends, are tuning up. My manager gives me a final, encouraging nod. They're waiting for you, Sal. She says dot. I walk from the dimness of the wings into the blinding white of a single spotlight. The roar of the crowd is a physical wave that hits me in the chest, but this time it's different. It's not for a band. It's not for a brand. It's for me. They're chanting my name. Celeste, Celeste. I walk to the center of the stage, my acoustic guitar the only shield I need. I look out into the sea of faces, into the darkness filled with the tiny, glowing stars of 1,000 cell phones. A year ago, I was alone in my room, singing these songs to a laptop camera. Now I am here. I play my heart out. I play all the songs from Mbia Cuento KO. I play them with a power and a joy that had been impossible before. I am not just singing about the pain anymore. I am singing about the survival of it. The crowd sings every word back to me, their voices a great supportive choir. For the encore, I do something I hadn't planned. Thank you so much, I say. My voice a little shaky, the roar of the crowd dying down to an expectant hush. The past year has been a journey. I wrote a lot of songs about the difficult parts of that journey, about losing things, about losing people. I pause, thinking of Nina's email. But recently, I've been trying to write about what comes next, about what you find. I want to play you something new. I start to play a song no one has ever heard. A song I finished just last week in my quiet apartment. It's not about heartbreak or anger. The chords are simpler, the melody brighter. It's a song about the quiet strength of the Cybalom rain. It's a song about the kindness of a mother's cooking. It's a song about the difficult, messy, and beautiful possibility of forgiveness. It's a song about peace. When I finish, there is a moment of pure, perfect silence, and then the applause. It is the loudest it has been all night. Back in my dressing room after the show, I look at myself in the mirror. The face looking back at me is no longer a victim. She is no longer an avenger. The ghosts are quiet. The fire is banked. She is just an artist. A woman who has been through a war and has finally truly come home to herself. My story was not about the friends I lost. It was about the voice I found. And I was finally ready to use it, not to recount the battles of the past, but to sing. About the endless, hopeful possibilities of tomorrow. The set was over, and my life was just beginning.